Chapter 36. Death. Just as Sudi Peng suddenly came to life and uttered that alarming phrase, indicating that the Jingjue queen might still be alive, I instinctively looked up to see that the coffin lid, crafted from the sacred wood of Kunlun, had cracked open slightly, sending a surge of fear through me. Fatty and Shirley Yang were equally unnerved, everyone grasping for a sense of calm. With the lid ajar, it seemed we had no escape from the potential disaster looming over us. Fatty aimed his gun at the queen's sarcophagus, while I gripped my entrenching shovel and the black donkey hoof tightly, bracing for whatever might emerge. My mind raced with possibilities. If the queen was some kind of ghost, how would we deal with her? If she was more akin to a reanimated corpse, a zombie, of sorts, what then? The narrow stone beam offered little room to maneuver, let alone retreat. There was no more movement from the coffin, just the open crack. We faced a choice. Either retreat immediately regardless of any movements within the sarcophagus or approach directly and open the coffin to confront whatever lay inside head-on with shovel, black donkey hoof, and assault rifle at the ready. I quickly decided the first option, retreating right away, was not viable. The sinister force lurking on the beam, which had likely caused the eerie deaths of Sudi Peng and Chu Jian, was the clearest evidence. This devilish, mysterious force seemed to be waiting for the right moment to strike, targeting us for disturbing the peace of the queen. If we were attacked on the narrow beam during our retreat, we'd have nowhere to turn, making it vital to press forth, hoping this stone path above the abyss wouldn't become our final journey. I exchanged glances with Fatty and Shirley Yang. A silent consensus was reached without words. Although nothing had happened yet, we were seemingly in a do-or-die situation. We had to open the coffin and identify the enemy, first to figure out a way to deal with the threat. Fatty handed Shirley Yang the assault rifle to be ready to shoot at a moment's notice, then spit into his palms and signaled for my help to push the coffin lid. Due to several thick iron chains wrapping the coffin, we could only push the lid from the front end, not slide it off sideways. Suppressing the unease within, Fatty and I counted to 3 before pushing the lid with all our might. The coffin, made from the trunk of the Kunlun sacred tree, appeared largely unprocessed, retaining much of its original form, the bark still fresh as though the tree was recently cut. Had it not shifted slightly on its own to reveal the seam, it would have been challenging to distinguish the lid from the rest of the coffin. The coffin lid was not very sturdy. Fatty and I managed to shift it with some effort. With our gas masks on, we were unable to smell anything from within, but we could clearly see a female mummy lying inside, dressed in jade garments and nothing else. No accompanying burial items. The mummy wore a black mask, hiding her face, leaving us unable to discern the finer details or the condition of her preservation. Fucking hell, I thought. The notorious, brutal Jingjue queen hidden behind a mask even in death. Fatty wondered out loud whether the queen had been causing mischief from within her coffin, prompting us to uncover her face, to determine whether she was indeed the Western region's leading beauty or a monstrous figure. Let's find out, I agreed. You unmask her, and I'll be ready with this black donkey hoof, just in case she's really a demon. Then we'll let her eat a mouthful of this demonic repellent. Holding the hoof, I prepared to insert it into the corpse's mouth. Fatty rolled up his sleeves and reached out, swiftly pulling off the mask from the mummy's face. The revealed face had black hair like clouds, delicate brows, and a fair complexion. Her eyes were tightly shut, her skin ashen white, making her appear like a living person rather than a corpse. Before this, I had often wondered what the queen looked like. Was she plump or slender, blonde and blue-eyed? Or did she have a sharp nose and deep-set eyes? But had I imagined her a million times, I never thought she would look like this. Fatty and I both gasped in shock, for the face of the Jingjue queen was identical to that of Shirley Yang, as if they were both carved from the same mold. Confusion roiled within me, and as I turned to gauge Shirley Yang's reaction, I found she was nowhere to be seen. Could it be that this body was not the queen's, the real Shirley Yang? Goosebumps covered my skin, and waves of despair washed over me, followed by feelings of sorrow, fear, panic, helplessness, and confusion that all rushed into my mind, blanking my thoughts. Our adversary was so enigmatic that we were like meat on a chopping board, completely at its mercy. not even knowing what we were up against. As I stood helplessly, a cold draft beside me hinted at an eerie entity approaching. Well, come on then, I thought, raising my shovel and swung. To my horror, as I focused, I realized I had struck Fatty, cleaving off half of his head, his blood spurting out as he fell lifeless to the ground. Paralyzed in shock, I wondered what I had done. How could I have been so careless? Fear-stricken by the supposed demon queen, I had killed my best friend. My heart sank in despair. In less than a day, 5 of our 9-member archaeological team had perished, including my decades-long comrade Fatty, whose head I had severed in one swing. Left alone with the weight of the loss, I was overwhelmed by a sense of futility. The question of life's purpose haunted me. If perhaps I should have perished during past trials on Kunlun Mountain or the battlefields of Yunnan, sparing me the grief of accidentally taking the life of my closest ally. Even contemplating my own death, I was gripped by the shame of facing Fatty again in the afterlife. How could I explain what had happened when it was my own hands that had ended his life? The guilt was a heavy burden to bear, leaving me in a state of desolation and turmoil. Overcome with despair and a splitting headache, it felt as if my entire body plunged into an icy abyss. In a moment of complete desolation, I drew a dagger from my waist and aimed it at my chest, ready to plunge it into my heart. But as the dagger's tip touched my skin, I heard 2 gunshots ring out, and a bullet struck the blade, knocking the dagger from my hand to the ground. Suddenly, the surroundings became shrouded in fog, blurring my sight. Whose gun had fired? My mind felt hazy, and as I pondered, everything seemed amiss, as if logic itself had turned upside down. Then, distantly, I heard someone call out a name. "Old who, come back, run back." The voice was like a lightning bolt in the dark night. Although uncertain of what was happening, my instincts told me I had fallen into a trap, as if ensnared by witchcraft. With that thought, I bit my tongue to awaken my senses, and to my shock, I found myself standing in the middle of the stone beam, not at the queen's sarcophagus. The corpse flower on the intact coffin ahead was in full bloom, its petals unfurled, exposing the pistol aiming at me like a radar. On the other end of the stone beam stood 2 figures, Fatty and Shirley Young. They were hopping madly and yelling desperately at me. They weren't dead. Fatty, gun in hand, shouted, "Old who, have you lost your mind? Get back here." With no time to consider, I dashed back toward them, tearing off my gas mask and spitting out the blood that filled my mouth. Only then did my mind start to clear. I asked Fatty what had just happened. He exclaimed, "Holy shit, man. You almost gave me a heart attack. Weren't you trying to save Suttipung? You reached the middle of the beam and just turned around, looking like you were sleepwalking, swinging your shovel madly. Then you started doing all sorts of weird gestures, and no matter how much we yelled, you couldn't hear us. Next thing, you're trying to off yourself with that dagger. I tried to come stop you but couldn't make it in time, so I had to shoot the dagger from your hand. Are you insane? Or did a ghost possess you?" Glancing back at the narrow stone beam and reflecting on everything that had transpired, I pieced it all together and realized the truth. The entire sequence of events I had experienced was a hallucination induced by the diabolical corpse flower. Damn it, the plant had been trying to lead me to take my own life.